Hi, it's Dennis Daly. Nice to have you along on All Week Theater, where we take a classic radio episode and play it out over 5 days. Now in part 4 of the Lincoln assassination, as heard on You Are There, we begin with correspondent Quincy Howe.
A note has just been handed me. John Daly, in front of the Patterson House, has news of President Lincoln's condition. So we take you now to the Peterson House.
This is John Daly in front of the Peterson House, where President Lincoln was carried after he was shot in Ford's Theater across the street. The president is sinking swiftly. He has not regained consciousness since Booth sent a single bullet fired at close range into the area behind the president's ear. The surgeons are discussing now the question of removing that bullet. Mrs. Lincoln is in there at the bedside, so is the president's son, Captain Robert Lincoln. Tad, the president's younger son, is at the White House. He has been assured that his father will live, but this was told the lad only to quiet him. Major Rathbone was slashed about the arm and shoulder by Booth and fainted from a loss of blood. He has been taken home. In addition to Secretary of War Stanton, most of the cabinet members have arrived, and here comes the Secretary of the Navy, Mr. Gideon Wells. Mr. Wells, this is CBS. We know how great your grief is at this moment, sir, but there are so many questions still to be answered about this frightful tragedy. Will you help us? Who is this amazing madman, John Wilkes Booth?
This lunatic, this unspeakable Judas, is a known secessionist who did not have the courage to don the uniform of his cause.
But what possible motive, sir, do you think he could have had in committing this hideous crime?
Only a mind deranged could have given birth to such an act. It may be that he thought to kindle again the dead spark of rebellion. If so, he is as great a fool as he is a villain. The war is over. The Union will stand. Booth has done the Confederate cause more harm than he can imagine.
What about the South, sir? What will the South think of Booth's act?
I do not know the mind of the South, but I predict that when the men who fought with Lee, in uniform, under a flag, and according to a clean code, hear of this day, they will shrink with horror from this vile deed. Assassination is not an American tradition. It never struck in this country until tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I know that as Mr. Lincoln's friend and Secretary of the Navy, you want to go in and see him. A note has just been handed me. It says, "Oh, this is sad and tragic news. The president's pulse is still falling. His breathing becomes more labored." That's all the note says. As this night of unutterable gloom and sadness wears on, stern resolve melts. Great men weep openly. There's scarcely a dry eye in this crowd here. The door to the Peterson House is opening once again, and Mr. John Hay, President Lincoln's private secretary, is coming out. Mr. Hay, over this way, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hay, you've been close to Mr. Lincoln. Did he have any fear that he might be struck down before his great work was finished?
Our beloved president constantly received threatening letters, which he filed away in an envelope. In March last month, there were 80 letters in the envelope. It was marked assassination.
You mean letters from cranks and that sort?
Yes. In 1860 in Springfield, Mr. Lincoln saw a double image of himself in a mirror. One face held the glow of life and breath. The other shone ghostly pale, white, portent of a safe passage through the first term, and death before the end of the second.
That was 5 years ago, then, that he had this omen?
Yes. But only last week, the president dreamed that he was walking through the White House amid the sound of great sobbing. In the East Room, he came upon a coffin guarded by soldiers, surrounded by a weeping throng. The president asked, "Who is dead in the White House?" And the soldier replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin."
Well, how did Mr. Lincoln feel about these presentiments?
Perhaps he answered that question this afternoon. He was walking across the White House grounds, and he passed some profane, drunken men. Mr. Lincoln remarked to his guard, "Crook, do you know, I believe there are men who want to take my life, and I have no doubt they will do it. I know no one could do it and escape alive. If it is to be done, it is impossible to prevent it.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. The tragic news of the attack on President Lincoln has spread around the world.
So join me next time when we cut up yet another old-time radio show into 5 parts on All Week Theater.